Well, joining me to have a further look at today's papers is the political commentator, Jack Rowlett. Jack, I know you were watching last night. How are you feeling this morning?
Heartbroken doesn't even begin to cover it.
I mean, it's almost hard to process in a way. We have been here before at the last Euros, only 3 years ago, and the emotions are very similar. England haven't been the best team in the tournament. I suppose the one consolation is, if this is a consolation at all, whereas against Italy 3 years ago and we lost on penalties, there was a sense that England really should have won that match. I think this time around, England did their best. They are heroes. They deserve a lot of praise, but Spain were the better team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We were basically outclassed tactically last night. But I think in a way that just makes it feel more painful because it proves what a missed opportunity 2021 was. And as you say, we haven't played particularly well throughout the tournament. And I think as much as Southgate, if he does leave, will have left the English national team in a much, much better position than he found it, I think this tournament has really... I think this tournament, on the one hand, it's shown what Southgate's really good at, which is he's a team leader, right? And he's completely changed the mentality. And that's why we win penalty shootouts flawlessly now. And that's why we can kind of pull spectacular goals out of the bag at the last minute to get us through to the next round. But actually, as a tactician, he's firmly second rate. When you're watching Spain last night, like, you can see the system that Spain are playing to. There is a very clear Spanish identity. And when they're making substitutions, they're just replacing players in that system. Whereas it feels, watching England under Southgate, there is no system. There is no English identity. It's always, oh, can we bring Cole Palmer on? Or, oh, can we bring Ollie Watkins on? Or whoever. And can they just pull something out of the bag and change the game? There is no... It doesn't seem like there's a strategy. And I think... Look, I love Gareth Southgate. He seems like a wonderful man, but I think his time is up now.
I suppose the counter-argument would be there is an assumption that if you were to replace Gareth Southgate and bring in someone who could put a bit of fresh impetus into the side and maybe take them to the next level, that one more heave and maybe next time around at a major tournament at the World Cup in 2 years' time or the next Euros, which is going to be held in the UK, England might be able to do it. But isn't that quite a complacent assumption? I mean, maybe we regress. You know, it's not necessarily a linear progression and we're going to be better with the next manager. It might be we go back post-Southgate to the England team of old, the England team that we all grew up with, which is underperforming, players feeling the weight of pressure, almost being scared to play football, scared of the shirt. Then maybe we go backwards. Maybe we will look back in a few years' time if we move on from Southgate and think we never had it so good.
Maybe we will, but I think the difference now is you look at there's a very clear strategy in terms of bringing through youth players and developing players at academies, and you look at the massive amount of talent England have coming through the youth pathways. We're world or European champions in lots of the different age groups, or have been at recent tournaments. You look at the star players for England in this tournament, whether that's Bellingham, Foden, Saka, they're all in their early 20s. They're so far from their peak. So it really feels like it's like this generation of England players are going to have several more shots at winning a tournament, whether that is 2026, 2028, 2030 even. And I think Southgate's had his chance. And he has reduced the weight of the shirt. He has transformed the relationship with the fans and the press, and that's fantastic. And whoever takes over, if he does go, needs to carry that forth. But actually, if you don't have a manager who can create a tactical system and create an identity that wins you tournaments, ultimately, that's not that much use in the end. We've got to 2 major tournament finals. That's fantastic, but we need to take the next step.
The Times is reporting this morning that regardless of last night's result, he's going to receive an upgrade on the OBE he received a few years back. Whether that will be a knighted or I suppose he could go up to a CBE instead. Do you think it should be Sir Gareth? Do you think regardless of last night's result, what he's done for England means that he should be knighted?
Yes, but not now. I think we don't... I think the precedent is, you get a knighthood if you're part of a sporting team that wins a tournament. I think he's done more than enough for sport in this country that he probably does deserve an award. But let's leave it a while, as we did for Bobby Robson. I think he got his about a decade after he stepped down as England manager after Italia 90. I think something like that is more appropriate than giving it in the immediate aftermath of this tournament.
Morning to Roger in Edgware on WhatsApp, who says, "Don't look back, only forward. The FA should not discourage Gareth Southgate's decision. If he does, from moving on. And I think that will be the interesting thing. I don't think the FA are going to sack him for one moment. I think they want him to stay, partly because, frankly, who else is there? You know, there aren't that many other managers, English managers, who could replace him. But if it's Gareth Southgate who comes to the realisation maybe his time is up, maybe that's the best thing. I don't know. I'm torn over it. Personally, I think maybe he should stay, but who knows? This debate will rumble on. Let's come on to the other massive story around this morning, Jack, which is, of course, the horrendous scenes we saw in Pennsylvania on Saturday night with the attempt on Donald Trump's life. How do you think this is going to impact the presidential election? I mean, we have the Republican National Convention this week, as it happens, sort of weird coincidence that it's happening this week. And Donald Trump, we expect to address delegates on Thursday. It'd be fascinating to hear what he has to say. A lot of people saying that this will actually play out in his favour and that, you know, if he wasn't already, he is now the overwhelming favourite for November's election. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think we're in danger of looking at this through the lens of an America that doesn't really exist anymore. You know, if this happened 30 years ago, you would absolutely expect that the candidate that had been shot at would see a big rise in support in the polls. You know, they would be seen as a strong figure, and there's that desire to unite around them. But actually, America in 2024 is just massively polarized. There just aren't swing voters anymore. It's all about turnout. And I think, you know, Trump is facing an incumbent president who is basically senile, who can't string a sentence together, who the majority of Americans, if you look at the polling, don't think is capable of holding the office. And yet Biden is only, 2 percentage points behind Trump in the polls. How much do you have to hate Donald Trump to still be voting for Biden despite thinking he's senile? And I don't think Trump being shot at will change any current Biden voters' mind about who they're going to vote for. I mean, it might mobilize Trump's base more, but it kind of seems like they're already pretty passionate and pretty likely to turn out to vote anyway. I guess the real change is actually that it could mean there isn't a change in terms of it could protect Biden's status on the Democratic ticket.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Which is a bit, it's kind of a weird outcome from it. But it's as you say, it's taken all the focus off questions over Biden's position.
Yeah, absolutely. At a really crucial, pivotal moment. And we know that there was a quote from a Democratic member of the House of Representatives saying that they're now resigned to a Trump victory. And so they've given up on trying to oust Biden. Incredibly defeatist attitude. But I think we need to remember Trump's only 2 percentage points ahead in the polls. He's the slight favorite. He was the slight favorite before he was shot at. He still is now. It's still all to play for because ultimately most people have made up their mind. And I do wonder if maybe actually, obviously the Republican National Convention is this week. The majority of Americans don't like Donald Trump. This election comes down to turnout. It comes down to if the Democrats can get all their voters out, in which case they probably win. And I do wonder if all of the focus going back onto Donald Trump, maybe that helps the Democrats because maybe that reminds voters why they don't like Donald Trump after all.
We shall see. Jack, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's political commentator Jack Rowlett there with a look at the morning's papers.